All right, this is Fred Leland here. I just want to congratulate the Break It Down show for their upcoming milestone of reaching 1,000 episodes. Hard to believe. I can remember when you started this thing, and now we're coming up on 1,000 episodes. That's outstanding, guys. Outstanding. I also want to talk about a great upcoming show with Sid Heal and Leah Anaya out of California, both police officers, career police officers, and they have a great show coming up on basically policing a free society, what it takes, and why cops do what they do. It's a great episode. So I think everybody will enjoy that. While we're at it, I know Pete and John, they do in the Break It Down show, does a lot of great charity work. And I think it would be a great for them if some guys would think about Save the Brave charity that they're always talking about here on the show for us to consider for a charity ourselves. I think would be great. Again, I've been on several shows here since the get-go. I am honored to always be back on the show. And I'm actually honored here to be doing this 1,000 episode commemoration, if you will. It's good work you're doing out there, guys. Great work. So anyway, enjoy. Thank you.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Cruz.
This is Bryce Vine.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Daryl Ames.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Rob Nair.
And this is Jim D. Felice, and you are watching the Break It Down show.
This is Leah Anaya, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
I love it. I love it. I love having these complex conversations about policing and whatnot, because the thing I know from the officers that I know is that you guys are all desperate to be good servants of the community. You're wired to do this. You're called to it. And it's too easy to just say stupid things like defund the police and stop there. Like there's a lot more challenges to this. And anytime we're talking police stuff, I want to have either Fred Leland or Sid Heal on the show. Today we got Sid talking about the police problem with us so that we can all understand like what the police are dealing with, so we can start to figure out how to help them and do our part as a community to understand and slow down a little bit before we start dismissing people and calling them, I don't know, racist, evil murderers or whatever it is that tends to be the social answer for these things. So I appreciate both of you coming on the show. I definitely want to take a moment and here's Sid's book. It's called Concepts of Nonlethal Force. And he talks in the previous episode that we had with him and Will Riley about how nonlethal force is largely the same as it was for Wyatt Earp in the late 1800s. It hasn't changed a whole lot since then. And we're not giving police necessarily all the tools they need to handle these things non-lethally. We've gotten a little better, but we need to get a lot better and give our officers a chance to survive and to be able to do their job without having to use lethal force all the time. And then Leah also has a book, and I'm going to put the links up here on the show. And if you look in the show notes on the podcast side, you'll see it there. Her book is called Policeman Daddy. It's like a kid's book focused on policing. And I thought we might start with you, Leah, describing what Policeman Daddy is, and then we'll have this more complex conversation following that.
Okay. Well, I was telling my son a story one night. He was sad. He missed his dad. My husband's an officer. And after I told it to him, I was like, wait, that's kind of cute. I should write it down so I could tell it to him again. And I did. And then between my husband and my dad pushing me, I found a publisher and made it a book. And it's just a little kid who loves his policeman daddy, and he wants to see what he does. He wants to go be with him all day and be a policeman himself.
No, that's adorable. And your publisher's Tactical 16. They are friends of ours at the show here. I'm not paid to say
Tactical
this.
16, yes.
Yeah, and they're good people. Chris runs it. I'm going to put up the Tactical 16 link here as well. But these are good people. We've had a lot of their guests on because I'm always trying to support Chris and what he's doing as he supports all of authors like you who are out there crushing it. So thanks to Chris, and thank you for coming on the show. And then Sid, would you break down your book for us real quick?
It deals with the concepts of non-lethal force rather than the technology. And it's written peer-to-peer rather than instructor to student or mentor to protege. As such, you might find some sarcasm and some cliches and other absurdities. But it's basically designed as an exchange of information between people that actually have skin in the game.
I read a story where someone put someone who was challenging the police position on lethal force, and they put them into a simulator, and it was like a computer screen simulation kind of thing. I'm sure you guys have seen these things. And the simulation company literally went in just to make the point, and they put that person's kid's head on one of the things just to show how dangerous and how hard this work is. And that person shot their kid in the simulation, and just to bring home the point where, like, this is not easy. And Sid, your story that you told about that kid with you and your partner, you know, and it was like a Hispanic kid, and he had a gun, and I mean, you were emotional. I was emotional. Will Riley, we were all emotional in the challenge of trying to keep people safe in an environment where you just don't have enough information. And as a Marine, it's not like you don't know OODA loops and how to do these things. You weren't just some rookie cop. It's an impossible situation that you were in. Can you briefly relate that story just to kind of give color to what it means to be a cop on the ground?
That story has stayed with me for my entire life. It occurred about 1981. My partner and I got a shooting call, which was not unusual at the station I worked. I can remember the streets and everything as we went through this, but it was on Miramani, which was an area that was heavily infested with a Hispanic gang. As we're driving up, we're looking for a suspect that is running southbound, and we're going northbound. So we're actually looking for the suspect coming from the scene. The closer we get, the more tense it is, and we're getting updates over the radio, so we know that it's an ongoing situation. And we see a guy, that's what we first interpreted it as, in the low light. It was at dusk on the sidewalk on the east side of Miramani. My partner points to him, and he says, "There he is." And he stops the car, and there's a bunch of parked cars between us. And he says, "I'll go north, you go south." And so I get out of the passenger side. We're double parked, and we basically sneak up on him. In those days, we all had revolvers. And as we get there, I can see this guy with a revolver, and it was fascinating in retrospect how realistic it was. He had the cylinder open, and he was putting cartridges in the cylinder, which to me, in the context that I had, he was reloading from the shooting that had just occurred. And so I'm waiting for my partner to get into position. So I'm very quiet, but I'm watching. And as Jim McSweeney, my partner, went north, and then he cut through between the cars, he had to stay off my gun target line. And so I knew that I wasn't going to be able to see him, so I was waiting for him to yell at the guy. So time is passing, and it's becoming more tense. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm safe until he closes that cylinder. And as this is going on, I'm taking in all the other factors and influences in play. And one of the things that was interesting is that we're both in full uniform, is that he's in front of a yard with a picket fence, and there's a man and woman sitting on the porch facing us. So they can see this whole thing. We're probably less than 50 feet apart. From me to him, I'm less than 25 feet apart. And so I get a sound on my radio, which basically used to just click it. And he clicks it twice, telling me he's in position. And so I step out and I yell at him, "Drop the gun, drop the gun, drop the gun." And he looks at me, he's surprised. That only adds to my belief that I'm on the right track. And I'm screaming at him, "Drop the gun, drop the gun." At the same time, McSweeney, who speaks fluent Spanish, is telling him, "Drop the gun," in English and Spanish. In the meantime, the woman on the porch is screaming. Well, I've tuned everything out except the guy in front of me. And I know she's screaming, but that's not an unusual event when we've been handling these high-risk calls. But there's just something about her screams that catches my attention. And I don't look at her. I remember looking at the guy. He still has the cylinder open. He's holding the gun in his left hand, and he's got his thumb ready to close the cylinder. And I know that he can't fire the gun as long as that cylinder is open. And I keep screaming, drop the gun, drop the gun, drop the gun. And finally, I stopped and let McSweeney talk, because McSweeney is yelling in Spanish. And there was a lot of people at that time that didn't understand English. But I got to tell you, I couldn't understand why he wasn't dropping the gun. In the meantime, the woman runs off the porch. There was no rail. She runs across the yard towards us. That was unusual. And that was the first event that challenged my conclusions. And I don't know what's going on, but I start thinking it's not what I originally thought. It's nothing I could have articulated. But I get a good sight picture, and I can remember there's two trigger pulls on a revolver. I can remember taking the slack up on the first part, which rotates my cylinder, screaming at him, drop the gun again. And he looks at me surprised. Then he looks back at McSweeney, and I step out so that he can see I'm a policeman. And the father, turns out it was the mother and the father of this guy. Father comes out, and he's screaming in Spanish. So now I really believe that he doesn't speak English. In any event, he drops the gun, and it's plastic. And what he had was one of those old cap pistols where you peeled the tops off and you stick them on the flint blade cartridges, and then they look like real cylinders. I mean, real bullets, and they make popping sounds, and he closes the cylinder. I mean, it functions very similar to the actual one. But I remember going up there and picking up the gun and think, I almost killed this guy. And turns out he's 12 years old. At that time, that was the first time I even recognized his age, how young he looks. Young now, but at the time, the only thing I was concentrating on was that gun. In any event, his mother's bawling. His mother's bawling, and the father's crying. And so we pick up the gun, and I can't believe how realistic it was and how close we came to shooting this guy. And McSweeney couldn't see his hands. So if I would have shot, McSweeney would have shot to save me, because I stepped right out in front of him so that he could see I was a police officer. Anyway, I'll shorten this up. We took the gun. We explained that there's no way that we were going to give this gun back. And the mother gives it to us, and we take it back, and we come in, and we actually, to be honest with you, we abandoned the original shooting call. We had units coming in from all over. They went up and handled the call. We told them we thought we had the shooter, and so we had originally put it out. And then we went back, and the sergeant had been in law enforcement for decades, longer than either one of us. And this was a real rough area anyway. But I remember he took one look at us and had us tell him the story. And it was like telling it right now. I mean, this has been 40 or 50 years for me, and I can't tell this story without choking up, realizing how close I was to killing this guy. And he pulled us both out of the field and reassigned all our calls. We sat in the briefing room for about a half hour until we begged him. We couldn't stay in the briefing room. We were just replaying it over in our minds. But it was a game changer for me. I don't know how I would have lived with it. I'd already been to Vietnam by that time. I'd already been in situations like that where I did kill people. And it really became the driving force for me to find some other way. I'd like to say that after all these years, I have a better solution, but I got to tell you, that situation has replayed itself in my mind over and over and over again. And to this day, I can't tell that story without choking up. I have been involved in a lot of situations where we had mandatory psychological debriefings. And one of the department psychologists told me one time that I can't tell a story without reliving it. He said, I'd be a terrible liar because I can't tell it without actually being there again. But I got to tell you, if there was a way to do this and make it as meaningful, if I could forget some things, I would forget, but I have never forgotten. It was one of those things that Steve Imes would call lawful but awful. Everything that I was using to make a decision was lawful, and it made sense, and they actually fit together as far as putting the situation together, and it was completely wrong.
Yeah. Well, thanks for telling that story. I know it's heavy for you, but I want to start there because it reveals, one, I mean, obviously you're still impacted by this thing, this decision. And then two, I don't know if you guys ever actually, if he was the shooter that was reported or if it was somebody else, but it doesn't matter for you when you go in there because the only thing you know is that this guy has a gun and there's a shooter. And when we see, yeah.
So, yeah, the investigation continued. That was a heavy call. And so they had like 3 or 4 more units backing us up. And when we got tied up and put it out that we had the shooter, they started converging on us. And then McSweeney ran back and got on the radio and rerouted them. But I'll just tell you, this kid was as pure as the driven snow.
Right.
He had been playing with his neighbors, and they had all gotten toy guns. It was just the wrong place and the wrong time with the wrong circumstances. It'd been one of those things that I would have been cleared, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
There's no way a jury wouldn't look at it the same way. But personally, I would not have been able to live with it. I think that probably would have been a very quick ending to a very short career in law enforcement. But it became a driving force for everything else I wanted to find out.
Yeah. My brother was a Marine and had a similar kind of conversion. He was an armorer, and it was on the back, on top of an Amtrak, because someone had a jammed Mark 19, which for the audience is a fully auto grenade launcher. And a grenade had lodged itself in the barrel. And so there's nothing more dangerous, especially if this is a newer weapon at this time. And there had been several incidences of this, and they basically all ended in catastrophic death for the people around the thing. And so my brother is up there, and sure enough, that grenade, it's not supposed to arm in the barrel, but it does sometimes. And so that grenade went off and it blew up and out, as opposed to down on him and then the gunner. And he got to say one of the coolest things a Marine can ever say. When it went, the gunner was like, I'm hit. And my brother got to turn his head and go, shut up, you're not hit. Because he's a badass. But it completely changed how he handled his arms room and how he saw how serious, any lapse in professionalism it would be. Not that you had done the wrong thing, not that my brother did the wrong thing, but just like the level of attention to detail for him rose significantly. I want to actually bring our guest in. Hey, Leah, when Sid tells his story, you've worked in Oakland, for example. How does it resonate with you?
Well, a lot of the things he's saying is spot on. He's talking about a jury. Yeah, a jury wouldn't have convicted him. That's for sure. But it's more than that. What people don't understand is that, great, I'm not going to jail, but what's more is that he can live with himself. And he, like you said, that would have been an end to his career personally, not because he would have been in trouble, but because he wouldn't have just been able to live with himself. The parents right there, and there's situations that are just so fluid, and like he was talking about too, normally when people scream and he's hearing the screaming, but really he's not hearing the screaming, because people are always screaming at us. And especially in high crime areas, there's people that are always, in the middle of situations, they're still screaming at the police or whatever. And God, that was a very powerful story. I was not expecting that.
Well, I don't think anybody, I mean, you're not supposed to expect that, right? Nobody expects that. But when you're in a city like Oakland, I mean, were there ever enough police on duty? I mean, it's like, I know in Vallejo, just up the road, there's never enough cops. Like they can't afford it. It's just too dangerous to keep enough people around. Did you ever feel like there were enough police on the shift with you?
Never. Actually, there were a few times when I was on one shift. It was like a day shift thing. I was the only free unit in the entire city of Oakland, because between major calls and people at the jail with suspects, I was the only cop. And I'm just thinking to myself, Lord, please don't let anything happen, because I'm it. And my dad worked there 21, 22 years too, and he told me the same thing. He's like, nothing's changed. There was still times when I was the only unit in the entire city too. And interestingly, they thought that it was a good idea to do layoffs, and they laid off 80 people plus 20 in the academy in 2010. And of course, it was political, and there was no money in the budget. But then 6 months later, they're calling us to come back, and I'm just thinking, these poor people in Oakland that are just left hung out to dry because there's no one there to protect them.
Yeah. My buddy Tom is chiming in. He lives in Vallejo. 7 cops on duty in Vallejo in a shift, and there's 120,000 people there, and there's a pretty good violence problem there. 7 cops. So, as a cop of one, how far behind you is backup? Is there backup?
Well, I mean, they were there, but some of them probably couldn't even hear me because they were in the jail. And I mean, if something happened, I'm sure somebody, well, I hope somebody would have been able to break off of whatever they were on and come to me. But I certainly wasn't doing any proactive work. I wasn't looking for any crime when I was just by myself. I would just be waiting for the tones to go off, or the emergency to come out.
Right. Boy, that is intense. I mean, again, Oakland is crazy. Sid, when she says that, 1 cop free in Oakland, and so Sid, just for everybody who knows, Sid worked with LA County sheriffs. There's no more complex and gigantic policing district than LA County. I mean, you can be 13,000 feet in the air on a mountain or in the water at the beach in a single shift. And it's insane. So, a city of 400,000 people, Sid, that's, got a lot of crime, got a lot of drugs. You don't want to go to West Oakland with, you don't have business there. It's just not a good place to be. And you're the 1 cop. What resonates with you when she says that?
Actually, I've been there. I've taught a lot of classes in Oakland. But needless to say, when she describes it, it becomes personal for us too. We have an advantage over a lot of the rural areas in the sense that backup was always going to be pretty immediate with me. Now, we've had them tied up behind cranes, tied up on other calls, especially if we have a shooting, but it was never like it has been in the rural. Uh, I've been in situations where the backup was so delayed that the sheriff's department would call LAPD, 77th or Newton or Southeast, which are our closest stations, to the point where we all knew them. CHP used to use radio monitors so they could hear the sheriff's frequencies because they worked the central division down there, and they would back us up. But you're right. When I first got into law enforcement, it was always, for us, it was 2-man cars because there was no women at the time. And I never really worked a 1-person car for a long, long time, years, because it was just too dangerous. And then exactly what she's describing, when the budget got tight, they had to tighten up something. And one of the ways it made sense on paper was to distribute your forces farther apart by putting them in 1-person cars. But I got to tell you, I got into some real trouble by myself. It took me a long time. I mean, I couldn't even begin to tell you all the differences between working a 1-person car and a 2-person car. What I stopped, where I stopped it, what I was looking for, where I went on patrol, even to where I put, in those days we didn't have handhelds, where I put the microphone. We used to lock the doors because we'd get attacked from the passenger side. I know several deputies that have been shot from the passenger side. So when we work one person cars, we always lock the doors. But the problem is that when you do a vehicle stop, you do most of your investigating on the passenger side, which means if you have to call for backup, you've got to abandon the suspect, run around the car to get in the driver's side, talk on radio again. So there was a lot of things that we had to adjust for based on the circumstances. So yeah, it's a lot scarier than people think. So it's not like on TV. I'll just tell you that.
You're not always eating a corn or chili dog, and the call comes in.
I don't know how many meals that were on the top of my car hood that I just left because we didn't even have time to sweep them off the car hood. I don't even know how to tell you. Basically, what it's referring to is called op tempo, operational tempo. What that means is the amount of activity per given unit of time. When I was working Firestone Station, it was not unusual where they would go out 12 at them, check the desk, you're 4 down, which means you got 4 calls backed up before your shift starts. It was just not that unique. So, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. I used to say, though, you don't get the amount of law enforcement you can afford. You get the amount you can tolerate. What happens is that if you keep, I say you, I'm being thing, if we keep hammering the people doing the job, they find out pretty quickly that they get paid the same for doing less. And we can make them go out in the field. We can make them handle calls for service, but we can't make them find criminals. And that was a huge thing when I was down there, was the difference what we called an electronic cop and a street cop. Electronic cop simply responded to whatever assignments they got from the radio. The street cop was actually trying to prevent crime. And so as a result of that, and what we call an OBS arrest, an observation arrest, somebody that got caught before anybody found him, was really the litmus test between whether you were earning your money or not.
Leah, when you're earning your money as a cop in Oakland, and you're the only one who's free right now, and you know how big Oakland is too. I mean, granted, you've got lights and sirens. You can go across town faster than anybody else can, but you can be nowhere near where you got to go. And then let's say you go somewhere and then you have to arrest somebody. Now there's no cops on the street. I mean, you're tied up for what, 5-6 hours, I'm assuming? Like, let's say a legitimate thing happens. Some kid shoplifts and you're like, yep, got to teach this kid to listen. You put handcuffs on him. How long until there's actually a cop back on the street if you were the only one out there at that time who was not tied up doing something?
Well, to be honest, if it was that kind of call and I was the only car on the street, I wouldn't be making that arrest at that time. It would be complete priorities only, because then, like you said, that kind of call, especially if it's a juvenile, I'm tied up for hours, and the criminals know it. They have radios. They know there's no cops on the street. You know, they can hear the dead silence, and they know. So the only time I'm going anywhere is if it's a major call. And you know, what Sid was saying, it's funny because how he's saying, you know, there's a difference between actually responding to calls and actually finding criminals. And when we got laid off in Oakland, we were all talk like, I'm not going to do anything. I'll take my reports and I'll do, yeah. But no, we saw, you know, you get out there and you see hand to hand, you're going to do something. And we're like a day away from our last day, and we're trying to, you know, get informants signed up. Like, it's just, that's the way the cop, and unfortunately, almost every single cop that got laid off in Oakland was that kind of cop, because we're all, you know, we're rookies. We're excited. We want to be there. We want to be doing the work that we signed up to do. And then they get rid of us. And now you've got way less cops. And like you said, if one cop does something, they're gone. Just count them out for 5-6 hours. and that's just a huge disservice to the city.
And to you professionally. I mean, if you or your peers are getting laid off, what are you supposed to do? Go on unemployment? Go drive an AC transit bus around town or something? I mean, legitimately, like,
Well, we did go on unemployment.
right. Now you have police on unemployment. Did you feel like you were properly okay? Look, you know the law and all that kind of stuff, and the procedures and everything. But to drive around town as one or two or even three cops, which it seems insane to have only three cops loose in Oakland at one time. But did you feel like you were prepared as well as you could be in terms of what all the things that you might encounter?
Well, the training in Oakland, maybe I'm biased. The training is fantastic. It's incredible. They're really great there. And so training wise, yeah, but I mean, then again, you just never know what's going to happen. And, we had our day, like four of the biggest badasses in policing got murdered on the same day by one guy. That, if something like that would happen and I was by myself, I have no idea what I would have done or wouldn't have done.
How hard is it to want to stay with Oakland PD? Because I'm assuming that Oakland is more dangerous than the standard. I mean, maybe Richmond is as dangerous in that area, but how dangerous is it, and how much day to day are you like, this isn't worth it? I got to get the hell out of here.
Well, when I was laid off, I came up to Washington, and so I left. And like I said, 6 months later, they're asking us to come back. And my husband and I both had spent all of our money to relocate. We weren't married yet, but I had a son, and so I had my son enrolled in a new school, and left my family, and we were up here starting our life. And I wasn't about to go back, especially somewhere like Oakland, where yes, it's super fun for the most part to work, and the people are great, but at the end of the day, what's going to happen next month when the budget is messy again, and then are they going to let us go again? And the quality of life up here in Washington for my family is so much better than down in the Bay Area. So I mean, I learned a lot in Oakland. I'm grateful for the time that I had there. I'm grateful for the friendships that I formed, but I'm not not missing it. That's for sure.
Sid, when she says all this, I mean, I know it resonates with you, but we don't know this in the general populace. Like us civilians, we have no idea that Oakland cannot keep talent, in part because, listen, living in Vancouver, way easier than first off, having to live in Tracy, drive over a mountain to go to work, and then be by yourself. Are you kidding me? Nobody wants that job for long.
When I was a watch commander and I was going back to Firestone, I think I have the record that I know of. I had 5 officer-involved shootings on one shift, one 8-hour shift. But when Leah's talking, I can't help but laugh, because at one point in time they reduced us to the bare minimum, way beyond what we thought was safe minimum staffing. But in reality, there's no industry standard for that. There's no way you can go out there and say this is unsafe and this is safe. And so what happens is they keep reducing it until some catastrophe occurs to make it apparent for everybody. In my particular case, it was funny because it turned out that way. But what had happened was it was on day shift. And to save money, everybody that had a subpoena came to work, and then they were in court. And so what happened was we get a burglary in progress call, and my partner and I, a 2-man car, get the call, and there's no backup. And usually you'd get 459 now, 12 Adam handle, 11 boy assist, attention 10 Sam, which would tell you that the field sergeant knows you have the handle and here's your backup unit. But it just comes out, whatever call we were, whatever radio call we had, but I'll just use 12 Adam because I worked it for so many years. But 12 Adam handle 459. So my partner was Ed Oliver on this case, and we got there, and it's a huge abandoned apartment, and there is a car out there. And at first we think, oh no, they're working on it. But then the informants that called in the call are on the other side of the street, two ladies, and they say, no, they're stealing stuff. I said, and needless to say, we asked how many. So she says we saw at least 3, but we know for sure there's 1 in there now. And so Ed looks at me. He says, "So what do you want to do?" And he goes right back to what Leah said. He says, "Let's go in." And so we go in, and sure enough, the first guy we catch him right at the entrance on the 2nd story. But we can't watch him. We can't take him back to the car. And now they know we're there. So we handcuff him, and we handcuff him to the railing that goes upstairs. So now we're upstairs clearing, and we haven't checked in because we can't get back to the radio car. In those days, remember, we didn't have handheld radios. So we hear what's called the alert tone. And we hear Sheriff's Radio Center go, "Attention, 12 Adam. 12 Adam, code 1. Code 1, 12 Adam," which means answer the radio. And Ed looks at me, he says, "So what are we going to do?" I says, "I am not running out to that radio car and letting these guys go." So we continue to go on, and then we hear the alert tone again, and then we hear a roll call. "Attention, any unit to assist 12 Adam, non-responsive at a 459 now, burglary in progress." And now she's activating stations. The LA Sheriff's Department is the largest sheriff's department in the world. When we were at full capacity, we have roughly about 20,000 people, about 650 radio cars on duty at any given time. And what happens is that we have completely depleted the radio cars at Firestone Station. And so she is calling for backup for us from Lenox, Linwood, Commerce, Lakewood stations to roll. And so the first unit that rolls is the jailer. The jailer grabs the shotgun, runs out, jumps in a radio car, and one of the dispatchers on the desk runs out to back him up, which, interesting enough, was Jim McSweeney, was the dispatcher. And he's got a 2-inch because they're both working desk duties. The other guy doesn't have, just Dave Formansky, big guy, has a shotgun. But the reason I say that is it was funny is we get out there and they see the suspect, the one we got chained to the railing. And they're screaming, "Freeze, freeze, freeze, get your hands up, get your hands up." And the guy's yelling, I can't. They got me handcuffed. Sit down, sit down. I can't, because we've handcuffed him to the ring. The reason I say that, it got so bad that by now, this is kicking up through the chain of command pretty fast, because as Leah has mentioned, things go bad real fast. They're calling the courthouses to release the deputies, and the deputies are running off the stand to get to radio cars. This is the catastrophic event that got everybody's attention. In any event, long story short, they all get there. We get the suspect, and it was no big thing other than the tragedy that could have happened. But the feeling that you're all by yourself and you got whatever you're going to do, good or bad, is going to be up to you, really hits you home. And the reason I say that is that law enforcement, unlike the fire department is a blessing. Law enforcement is a necessary evil. And I think that's how they look at it. And so what happens is when it gets cut, it's real easy to say, well, nothing's happened for a month. We'll just cut them in half. I got to tell you one thing that Leah mentioned, though. We've been involved in some very tight budget situations, and I've been involuntarily transferred and reassigned and a variety of other things. We did not lay off. I'll just tell you, I have done a lot of research projects as I went up through the chain of command. After the first year, now this is some years ago, so I'm sure that the figures have changed. But by the time a deputy has completed all of the academy and all of the patrol training and is able to work by themselves under the California Commission on Peace Officer Standards of Training and has met all the requirements, that agency has invested roughly $250,000. And so as a result of that, when that guy gets up and leaves, the person that's going to replace him is not going to be there for another 10 years. Well, another 3 or 4 years. So as a result of that, it has ramifications, just like Leah said, they didn't go back. It's not disposable labor. It's not like hiring for a factory job. It's not like hiring anybody because especially, and Oakland is as an example as any, you get to know the people. Shoot, we used to laugh. I used to know the color of the neighbor's dog. We'd call them by name. People would wave at you, and we knew what they were having for supper and where their kids went to college. The guy that's coming in to replace us, even from another station, hasn't got a clue on any of this stuff. So it has ramifications far greater than just a temporary budget alleviance. So,
Yeah. Leah, I wanted to ask you, Sid, I mean, I think this is such a great conversation. I hope you guys are enjoying as much as I am. By the way, let's really quick plug Leah's book because it's important that we support what you do now. It's Policeman Daddy, and the link is right there on the screen. You can get it on Amazon. If you support Amazon through our link, you also are supporting Leah as she tries to, make this transition to books. She's also got her website that I can put the link up for that as well. But basically, it's leahanaya.com, and I'll put that up here in a moment. Thanks so much for talking with us about this stuff. But when people say defund the police, they haven't even considered the fact that we're at the budget's edge all the time where cops are getting laid off. Of course I'm going to leave, I mean, look, you can be a cop in Oakland or in my hometown of Benicia. Benicia's way better. There's barely any violence, it's like they probably pay a little better. And, you're just ready to leave. You're like, well, if you guys can't keep me working, I'm out, and like Sid said, there goes, I don't know, at least at that point, $100,000 at least of training that goes away. So, but it is fair to say, are we asking the police to do too much? Could in Oakland, like if I was to say, hey, Leah, now we're going to deploy the social worker because this is a social worker call. Is that a viable approach? How you see it in terms of you go to respond. You've got this decision tree with a zillion branches like, oh, this is domestic. Oh my God. Okay. Sorting all these things out. Could someone who doesn't have a badge and credential and gun go reliably do this work in the time it takes to respond to these calls?
Well, that is a loaded question because sure, maybe it comes out, as one thing and you get there and it's something completely different. We just don't know. That's why, I mean, nothing against firefighters, but that's why they stage. That's why they don't go into certain calls until they know it's safe. And likewise, social workers, I know up here in Washington, some of them I became good friends with, and they had to go in without police. It was CPS or something, and they had to go in without police, and they hated it. And if it got to the certain point where they're just like, I need police, then they back up and call us. But why risk that? What like Sid was saying, why wait for that catastrophic event when someone gets hurt or worse? Because people want to scream defund the police because they don't even understand what they're saying. And I'm not knocking social workers. I think they're fantastic. I think that if we can find a way to integrate them into showing up with us or, be like firefighters staging somewhere so that they can come in when we deem it safe for them to do so, that's fantastic. But on their own, I wouldn't want to send my child, into something like that. If my kid was a social worker, I wouldn't want to do that.
Sid, what are your thoughts on that, on this defund thing? I mean, I'm trying to be, I want to figure it out too, right? As much as anybody else, but it sounds like we have trouble finding the right amount of money. And then also, can you talk to this conversation about, hey, we're not putting a bunch of cops in Malibu. They all go to Hawaiian Gardens or, Cudahy or somewhere like that and you guys will say that's where the crime is. But, it's not a good look from the outside when it's like, yeah, you put all the cops in the areas where the Mexicans are or the blacks are, whatever it is. So can you talk to both of those aspects?
Oh yeah. I should probably tell anybody with a sensitive ear, they might as well put their fingers in now because, well, first of all, let's go to the social thing. The first questions you asked. Yeah. Like Leah, I'm all in favor of that. But I got to tell you, to get the level of education to be able to handle mentally ill people is unlikely that they're going to acquire the skills that is going to be necessary to survive. We never wanted the mentally ill problem. and I'm talking for law enforcement now, we never wanted the homeless problem. We're not equipped. We're not trained. And to be honest with you, there's not a lot of social outlets. I'll tell you another one that frosts me is drunks that are alcoholics. Yeah, I understand it's a crime, but they can't stop. And so what happens is that we wait until their behaviors become criminal before we are allowed to intervene. So yeah, take it. But I just got to tell you, backing exactly what Leah said, is that you're walking through a minefield. If you don't know some of the danger signals, you're going to find yourself without the ability of calling for backup. And I'm talking about armed backup. And I'll just tell you something that we have told ourselves for many, many years. Anything that you do to save your life, you're going to do. It's not going to be because your backup got there and saved you. So I call it the great social experiment for the simple reason it's going to irrefutably establish that law enforcement is far more complex than you can learn by watching TV. And every one of these hand-wringing, bean-counting, rock-painting, pencil-neck geeks out there that watch TV and believe that this guy is going to follow some script because it makes sense instead of dealing with irrational behavior is going to be having a rude awakening when this person is not following a script and is doing something that you couldn't explain. And I don't care if you got a PhD at the scene, you couldn't diagnose it or explain it. So there's my feelings on the social. I think it's necessary, and I think it needs to be a part of it. And I think you're going to find more policemen are for it than against it. But they are in that minefield. When you get into some of the other things, it is equally complex. The reason I am fairly comfortable is this is not sustainable. We got ourselves into this. I say we, as an American voters, for those that are going to allow the radical extremists, activists, and militants to speak on their behalf, are going to get the government that they have invested in. And so as a result of that, there's nobody that's going to be able to get out of it except the voters. One of the things that people forget is that law enforcement is a public servant. We expect to get our guidance on the community priorities and the community needs from the politicians. They're the elected officials. And so it's really not controversial for us to switch direction. We'll just tell you that it's going to be harder. And I'll just tell you that I'm not giving up my life for this. And I won't let any of the people that work for me give up their life for this. If you don't like the non-lethal weapon, well, guess what? We don't either. We've been one of the biggest complaints. And so as a result of that, if you don't like the fact that you're getting hit with an impact munition that is designed to create pain and uses trauma to create it, well, guess what? We've been saying this for 20 years and nobody listens. So yeah, spend some money on it and go out there and look for this stuff. And if you've got a better way, hey, we've been looking for it too. So just tell us. But to be honest with you, changing the direction without having a better idea is not solving anybody's problem. It's whining.
What about this concept of there's too many cops in Cudahy versus Malibu?
That is, if you want to go back and put the racial overtones in it that you added, we go where the crime is.
Yeah.
We're going to get a complaint. We got too many cops in Malibu where the rich people are, and all the crime is going on in Cudahy. So that's one example right there. But basically, there's two types. I guess I should explain a little bit. There's a difference between a sheriff and a police chief. A police chief works directly for the city. He serves at their pleasure. The sheriff is an elected official. They have an independent base. And as a result of that, we have to service people, and I'm talking about the communities, that are not represented by themselves. They're represented as part of the county, unincorporated areas. A lot of people don't know that LA County is the largest county by population in the United States. Population-wise, it's larger than all but 8 states. But 51% of LA County is considered rural because of all the mountains and the deserts. So what about the people that are living out there? Do they have a right to equal protection under the law? Well, the answer is yes. It's been established by the Supreme Court. And so as a result of that, the way that we're deployed is designed to reduce crime to the maximum amount. And as a result of that, there's always going to be compromises. And that's one of the reasons that we were always in a constant state of review and a continual state of revision, where we would beef up one place. And be honest with you, yeah, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. We don't have enough to go around. And so what do you expect? So just so you know, I believe at the last time when I was there was 21 to 23 patrol stations for LA Sheriff's Department. Each patrol station is the functional equivalent of a police department. It's run by a captain who is the functional equivalent of a police chief. Some of those are contract cities, which means that the cities have paid the county for the law enforcement agency. They own those just like a municipal agency like Oakland owns their cars. And they only leave that city when they're required, just like mutual aid for any place else. The unincorporated areas that have stations are dealing directly with the crime in that area. And as a result of it, the sheriff has a lot more leeway on that. But we have to turn in the exact amount of minutes that we're charging the city. It'd be a theft of taxpayer money if we didn't give them the law enforcement that they're paying for. So if you're looking at Malibu, that's a contract city. There's 88 cities in LA County. Everybody thinks LA City, but they're only one. They're just as big as we are, though. And so as a result of that, if you're looking at Temple Station, Lakewood Station, East Los Angeles, South Los Angeles, Century Station, they are becoming more and more regional now, and that gives us a lot more leeway on how we can apply additional law enforcement. But if you've got a problem like drugs, gangs, vandalism, traffic, that's coming too. But it's coming from places that are also having problems with that. So it's a constant state of shuffle. It also includes homicide, SWAT, K-9, Aero Bureau. That's one of the reasons that it tends to be more cost effective because of volume and scale. But there's no simple answer. There's no algorithm I can give you. Well, 2.2 per thousand is going to result in this. It doesn't work like that. It's really more of interpretations and probability that we're using to design the amount of law enforcement that is going to have an impact on your particular problem. But I'll just tell you the biggest complaint, and it's legit, is we're going to stop people that are up to no problem. Most of the time, we can say goodbye.
Yeah.
Sorry we stopped you. But some people see it as a personal vendetta. That was never our intention, but we don't have the ability of determining who's up to no good and who's not. And so as a result of that, we get in situations where everything is lining up and we come to a different conclusion. Boy, if I could just emphasize one thing to any of the citizens that are listening to this, that you'd be amazed at how fast we can reach a conclusion with honest, candid answers. When you start shucking and jiving and telling us that you have this right or you have that right, and you don't have to show us your driver's license and you don't have to tell us anything, you have no idea how that starts fitting into an evil scheme that we are already working on. In some cases, we're reluctant to give you the background because we don't want to give you the answers that it's going to prep yours. So just some simple, candid answers. And many times we can shake your hand and say, sorry, we stopped you.
I want to point out how complex policing is, especially being in the sheriff's department. And I'm sure you saw this story yesterday. I think it was yesterday, maybe it was Saturday. But in Orange County, where I live, a mountain lion had come down from the hills. And that meant that for hours on station is a helicopter. And there must have been, and Sid, this won't surprise you at all. I saw, and I barely watched the news at all that day, I saw 20 cops. And that means there's got to be more involved in the area because you're literally trying to herd a cat in a neighborhood. And so What does that cost? And you think about how much that is, and you can't, we love that mountain lion. We want it to go to a safe spot. If it can't live where it's at because it's been chased out by other cats, great. It's got to now be transferred in a sheriff van, like tranquilized, lassoed. I mean, that's got to be $1 million endeavor right there. And that took a lot of resources for those hours that it took to get that cat off the streets. And you can't have that cat go tear somebody's baby apart or whatever. So talk a little bit, and I want to have Leah's response too to those kind of things, because crazy things happen in Oakland all the time. Florida, man, got nothing on Oakland, man. But talk a little bit about what that looks like from a sheriff's point of view, trying to herd an actual cat or whatever it is for LA.
Believe it or not, that is not an isolated incident. I personally have not done a mountain lion, but I've done bears. And what do? We don't have any measures. And if we do, how much do we use? In one particular case, we set a decision point because he was going towards a junior high school, and the lieutenant said, when it gets past the apron of this driveway, which is next to the circular drive at this junior high school, we're going to shoot it. Holy mackerel. And we shot it. Holy mackerel. You could not believe the uproar. Why didn't we call animal control? Well, we did. Animal control was en route.
He was standing next to me saying, shoot it.
Well, because he doesn't work on bears. He doesn't even work on people a lot of the time. It just went on and on. At one point in time, I told this lieutenant about this bear. He says, I don't want to hear about the bear. I don't want to talk about bears. But the interesting thing is that, what do you want us to do? This is not something that you can teach in the academy and then apply it 2 or 3 years later when it actually happens. The vast majority, I think one of the things that Leah will agree with is that we're in a conscious state of adaptation. There is no formula. There is no policy, no procedure. There is no technique that we can teach you that's going to be useful in every situation. In some cases, we will even tell you that we want you to disobey policy if it's going to be safe. And I'll just end my part of this with just one example. One of our units gets a call for a suicide victim. He's going to commit suicide. And the way he's doing it, he's at a gas station and he's doused himself with gasoline. And he's trying to get his Bic lighter lit. Well, if he managed to do that, for sure, he's going to die. It's also going to endanger everybody at the gas station, basically put him out of business. And so the first deputy gets there, he doesn't have time to call for backup. He doesn't have time to call for a sergeant. He doesn't have time to wait for any magic non-lethal weapon, whether it's going to work or not. The only thing he's got is his firearm and a taser. And so one of the questions we asked him, he shot him with a taser, by the way, and that's definitely against policy because it is a source of ignition in a volatile, highly flammable situation. And so what happens was we asked him, why don't you use pepper spray? He said he was dousing himself with gasoline. What was pepper spray going to do that the gasoline wasn't doing? Well, needless to say, it makes perfect sense. And he says, and his response, by the way, and I was on the review board on this, I wasn't going to shoot him. That's what he wanted. More than that, that's also a source of ignition. So we shot him with a taser, but that's not in policy. And then he said the best thing I've ever heard. So, what did you want me to do?
Uh-huh.
And there's where it ended. Because what happens is there's a lot of people that could criticize that, but nobody really had any better ideas.
Yeah.
And so now we dumped on this guy. And basically, there was 5 commanders on this review board, and we said no. He was out of policy, and he made the right decision. So, but it could have been very tragic. So
Yeah.
he saved him. But I'll just tell you, we'd have been sued. We'd have been unlawful death had it caught on fire, and it's very, very possible to catch on fire. So,
Leah, what do you think? You hear all this crazy stuff and the allocation of resources, and let's not forget too, there's 911 people that are trying to vector in the right resource, so that does happen. There is a sorting process, but usually the right answer is to send Leah. So when he says this about the random variables that come up, things that you can't be trained on in the academy because there just isn't time to train you on how to deal with a bobcat up in the Oakland Hills. What comes to mind?
Well, what Sid said earlier when he was talking about, hey, we never wanted mentally ill people. We never wanted these drunk people problems. Take them. That is 100% what we've been up here in Washington anyway, with the FOP. We've been talking about trying to get people to understand is that we are the catch-all. We don't know what to do, so let's call the police. This car is parked wrong. Let's call the police. There's a loose deer in the. Let's call the police. My kid is acting up. He's 9. Let's call the police. We're everything. We're expected to do everything, and we have 6 months of training. It's just impossible, literally impossible, to train on every situation that could come up, especially with how dynamic everything is. And so, people, I think the normal common sense people who are talking about defund the police, I think what they would really want would be more training, which guess what? We also want more training. We also, think that if we had more training, we could be more effective. And it's not a bad thing to ask for more training, but defunding, taking money away from police departments, taking officers away and resources away, that's not the way to do it.
I agree. And this budgeting problem, when we talk about the answer isn't always more training either, because no one's in line saying, I want to pay 50% more tax towards police because, as you know, Leah, like it's dangerous, hard work. And if, look, it's great that, Andrew Yang says all cops should have a purple belt in jujitsu. That's expensive. That's going to break somebody's, a certain number of cops are going to be irreparably broken from that. You'll have to pay for them to be retired. Policing in general is dangerous. I mean, it's just, as soon as you say more training, you're just saying we want to spend more money. And then if you had a purple belt in jiu-jitsu and a BA or a BS degree, because that's what it takes to get a job, and then your department lays you off because they can't afford you, you're going to be gone. You're like, I'm qualified to do something else, And so it's just, I don't want to take too much more time, but just kind of wrapping that part up, and I'll give you guys some final thought moments here, but that stuff is shocking to me. And one more thing, Sid, you said rob Peter to pay Paul. I'd like the LA County Sheriffs to get on this guy who keeps robbing me, and let's get Paul maybe in front first. Why is Paul some kind of Don? He's taking my money all the time. All right, little levity there. But Leah, any final thoughts on this? Because I'm desperate to try to get us to understand the complexity of policing. What would you want to say? Like, how can you add to this problem that we have in trying to get the police force we want, but be able to afford it? And I can't see how we can defund to make it, maybe increase funding. I don't know. But what are your thoughts?
I think an important thing to remember, no matter what the budget looks like, is that police officers, at the end of the day, they're human. Sid started this show talking about that incident that happened to him, and every officer out there could talk about some kind of incident like that. That's maybe not that intense, but a powerful, moment that defined who they were going to be as an officer, and the trauma that officers see, the trauma that they go through. They may or may not have a good support system. They may or may not have a department that backs them up. That's why peer support is so important, I think. But at the end of the day, we're human. We want to do what's best too. We're not waking up in the morning saying, "Oh, who can I go, shoot today?" That's not the reality. We're people. We're caring. We love the people that we serve, and we want to continue doing it, and we want to do it the right way.
Make sure if you guys want to get a great kids book for explaining policing for your kid, you can get Policeman Daddy. There's the link right there on Amazon. Look on the show notes if you're on the podcast side, and support Leah's work in general. Support Tactical 16 because they go out and they get great people like Leah to write books and support their dreams. So tactical16.com, tons of great books there, including Andrew Oak, who's the first ladies man. All of that stuff is great. Sid, I'm going to let you have the last word. Everybody should get Sid's book, Concept of Nonlethal Force, Understanding the Force, from shooting to shouting to shooting, at Amazon. All right, Sid, wrap us up.
I would leave with the fact that law enforcement is part of a system, criminal justice system. And what happens is when you tamper with one part of the system, it affects the other parts of the system. And I'll give you some examples. You can defund law enforcement. You can do whatever you want. We're willing. Matter of fact, we're looking for guidance, but you really need a plan. The fact is that if you're just out punishing police, it's going to have an effect, and immediately it's going to have an effect on the potential victims, as we've seen the crime rates rise. One of the other things that has really frosted me recently is district attorneys taking it upon themselves to arbitrarily dismiss cases for what they would consider minor crimes. And they have removed one of the best tools we have for the simple reason is that now we don't even have the ability to use a credible threat. And so as a result of that, it creates a competing interest that sucks off resources so that we can't focus on the bigger problems. And this is particularly the case in riots. The other thing is, too, is that those laws were passed by a legislature that represented the voters. And so as a reason, whether you agree with them or not, and I'll just tell you in LA right now, we're terrified, a lot of us are, of this, and I'll just tell you, Gascon. This guy couldn't find a giraffe in a flock of sheep. How in the world he got into this position, I don't know. But I'll just tell you right now, unless this gets fixed, you're going to see a catastrophic series of events right here locally. But the bottom line is that we're in this together. The police, the district attorney's office, the courts, and the community. Changing one is going to have an effect on the others. If you do want some solutions, what I would recommend is get some policemen involved in the problem solving. There's a lot of things that you're complaining about that we also complain about. For whatever reason, though, nobody has been listening. So we are actually on the same team. And some of us have some ideas on this, and we don't know if they're going to work, but nobody's been listening. So good luck. I will say this, though. We will not have the same conversation in a year from now, because at the present situation, it is not sustainable. It's going to collapse on its own weight, and we've already started seeing it. I don't think the patience of the American people is going to be infinite. And so there's going to be some political consequences for simply ignoring the voices that have some expertise in this particular field.
I lied. I'm going to have the last word. I totally agree with you. If you can't manage your level of policing in terms of like how to handle this, if you expect Leah to go into someone's restaurant and put cuffs on them and pull them out, you are sadly mistaken, because she's already said it. Like, I have to prioritize where my work is going to be. And if we're going to let people leave jail with no consequences, I think the bail business is bullshit and we need to fix it. People shouldn't have to pay 25% to be forced to use it. That stuff drives me crazy. But if you're going to let people who commit violence and vandalism, let them walk right back out the door, me as a citizen, I know I now have to raise my level of vigilance in response to, I can't rely on a cop to get here. They might be arresting some business owner. And so now you have citizens at a higher state of alert. And that means in a place like LA County or Orange County, where there are millions and millions and millions of people, you're going to have people getting shot without purpose. And you're going to have all kinds of problems because you didn't do your damn job as a DA.
Can I applaud?
Yes. You guys are awesome. This was such a great show. I thank you. Does anybody need to say anything else? I don't want to draw this out too long, but it drives me crazy when I see DAs doing things that are detrimental or putting down charges on cops that are clearly, I don't know what's going to happen in Minnesota when those cops go in front of a court, because I'm not a lawyer, but I know that if you're within procedure and you go there, there's going to be a problem. There's going to be a problem because these guys aren't all going to go to jail for the rest of their life, because that's just not how this works. No. And it's not going to be what people expect. I don't know what's going to happen, but anyhow.
I was just saying, people like Chesa Bowden in San Francisco, and Mike Schmidt here in Portland, and Kim Gardner, and all these people that just think they're doing some service to the people by getting them out of jail or not putting them in jail in the first place. That's great. How about the victims? How about the victims' families? How about the greater good, the community that doesn't want this stuff happening in their communities? They don't want to live in fear. They don't want to not be able to go outside and walk their dog for fear of being shot or harassed or intimidated. You're so, especially like Chesa, you're so worried about prosecuting your officers that you're losing sight of your community and keeping them safe.
Yeah, how many people are afraid to even wear a red hat these days for fear of being attacked somewhere near Portland? I mean, that doesn't portend to stability. All right, I'm going to shut up. You guys, awesome. Thank you so much. This is such a great show. I really appreciate you, Sid. As always, you're wonderful. Thank you very much. Everybody get Sid's book and get Leah's book. They're great people. Thank you so much.